So today we're talking about Canada, because apparently that's where we both live, somehow. So Katie Rose, how long have you lived in Canada?
A month and a half.
I've been living in Canada for about a year and 8 months, and I moved here for work reasons.
Correct.
Got a job here and seemed like a good opportunity. Ben married you. We are both from the States. So we're going to be talking about some differences that we found between like Canada and the States and just our experiences. We live in Montreal, so it's not going to be exhaustive of the Canadian experience. I do realize that Quebec and particularly Montreal are quite a bit different from the rest of Canada. So let us know in the comments if you live in Canada, you know, what your area is like.
Please no one get mad at our Canada discussions. Thank you.
Crazy.
What would you say is like the biggest, on a day-to-day living example, the biggest difference between when you were living in the States and here?
The transport is probably my biggest thing. I mean, and language, but that's not a big deal as much as I expected. But I'm either walking or taking public transportation because it's so easy anywhere. And usually I'd have to get in my car and actually drive and be coherent enough. If I have to wake up in the morning, be conscious enough to drive myself somewhere. And now I just have to sit my butt in a seat or hold on to a pole so I don't fall over.
Yeah, the metro system's really good. I own a car. We don't need it. We can get pretty much anywhere in the island using the metro system. We just don't need a car, which is very weird for me because I've driven that car from Georgia to Los Angeles. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, it's been all over the States. So, because you know what's awful? Driving in the snow or ice. Happy to not have to deal with that. The biggest difference, the biggest surprise of living here, and for me it was just how, at least from my outsider ignorant perspective, how Canada doesn't really seem to have an identity. It felt just sort of like a different state, honestly. It just doesn't seem to be that different from the United States to me. So I suppose I was expecting it to have its own sort of like voice and vibe and flavor. Overall, day-to-day life, the biggest thing I was surprised was by how it's really the same as the United States. And I've talked to coworkers who are Canadian themselves, some from Montreal, some from other parts of Canada, and what they've said about it is that a part of the Canadian experience is figuring out what the Canadian experience is. So I think their only identity they have is that they aren't the States, which is a distinction they have to make. Because if I airlifted someone from the States and plops them into like Toronto, for example, it might be a while before they realize the difference. So here it's a little more easy to tell just because it's more French oriented because Quebec, but other parts of Canada are not so French bent. So what about you? What would you say is the biggest surprise you're finding?
Well, my biggest worry before getting here was dealing with the French everything because I don't know the language. It made me very nervous, and I think when I got here and actually experienced it, I was expecting it to hinder my ability to do anything. Like, I expected it to prevent me from working, prevent me from actually interacting with people, prevent me from wanting to leave my home just because I thought that I don't like French. It sounds pretty. I just don't know what's going on. I think my surprise is that I still don't know what's going on, but not nearly as much as I expected.
Yeah, and I think people are generally bilingual and generally pretty gracious. Not always, but for the most part, I think we've had the good fortune to run into pretty cool people.
Yeah.
For me, this was less of an issue because my company is a British company, so everyone speaks English at the office.
I even gave someone directions the other day. I did have to ask them to speak English before I could actually be beneficial, but they did, and I answered them.
Where's your favorite place to go around Montreal so far?
Right now, I don't feel like we'll ever not be tourists because there's just so much to see and so many different parks, museums, shops, restaurants. There's always things going on. If it's warm, there's a festival. Just walking around and being out is probably the best thing ever because you're just engulfed by stuff.
And absolutely enjoy it
Yeah.
while it lasts. because once it ends and winter approaches, all the stores are going to close earlier. You're not going to want to go outside because it hurts to breathe, little things like that. Winter just shuts down because it's pretty bad. It's not as bad as other areas of Canada, but it's pretty bad.
A lot of stuff is connected to the metro to an extent. You can even wander the malls, and at least for me,
like shopping malls, underground.
Right. That's kind of what I did in Ohio anyway, so it'll be like home.
There you go.
Mall walking.
Yeah, it's super surreal too, because all of these little underground malls are connected in some way or another to either every major building or the other malls that are connected to other metro stops. So you can walk quite a ways without ever having to poke your head above the snowdrift. Yeah, so far Montreal's been treating us pretty well.
Have you noticed anything not weird, but just like obviously different when it comes to people and culture and just interacting with people?
Yes. In Quebec, there's a lot of tension between English speakers and French speakers, which is a strange way to put it, because our experience in Montreal, at least, in this, the relatively city area we live, everyone we've come across for the most part speaks both. However, there is a tension between the speakers of both languages, and I think in the 70s there were like bombings over it. Nowadays it's not as big of a deal. It's to the point where it just makes you feel, especially if you're from out of country like we are, it feel kind of weird about speaking English, because even though people are going to be able to respond, like every time you open your mouth it's kind of a political statement in some way, and that's kind of an awkward feeling.
Right.
We've gotten a little shade, but not a lot. But we've definitely talked to people who have gotten a lot of shade for it. People from the UK or from Australia, or even people who are Canadian but don't speak French.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an adjustment. So there's that. The stereotype about Canadians being super kind and apologetic and polite all the time is absolutely not true. Not even slightly. They're just as American as you can get. So that's a myth.
That
Myth
seems
busted.
like a
But
harsh term there.
then there's fighting words.
Uh-oh.
I work in an environment where people are coming all over the world to work at this organization, and it's very multicultural, very friendly, because most of us are immigrants. Not a lot of us are actually from Canada. What's weird for me is living in Canada, I have made friends with and worked alongside people from all over the globe. Very few of them are Canadian. So I think you have more experience in that regard.
Yeah.
So Canada.
Canada's cool.
A lot of people in the States, before I moved to Canada, would talk about how high the taxes were and it's socialism and blah blah blah. So yes, from the inside, I can say the taxes are quite high, but it doesn't really feel like it affects your paycheck too much. And the taxes do really cool things, like free public pools and clean streets and healthcare.
Free water.
Yeah, free water. We don't pay a water bill. That's free.
And it's well taken care of.
Yep, amazing parks, amazing free festivals that are just going year-round. That are just going all summer.
Year-round.
The snow removal service is extremely timely. It's very, very methodical and very necessary. So, I don't know, like, the higher taxes to me, they just seem worth it.
Yeah.
In general. Also, if you have a kid, they'll pay you an allowance, and you get guaranteed time off from work. So not only can you afford the kid, but you
get time with the kid.
Guaranteed time off work, and that's for the mother and the father.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome. I don't know, any criticism that my fellow Statesians, while I was living in the States, had about the Canadian system, I think is relatively unfounded, and I would be thrilled if America adopted a lot of these.
Is there anything that you were surprised you didn't see?
Hockey, maybe it's just Quebec isn't super into hockey, I doubt it. But in the States, when it's near Super Bowl season, you cannot get away from the flags and the paraphernalia and the people talking about it, and it's just pervasive. It might be that crazy even in Montreal. I just work for a company that pulls people from all over the world. I don't know. You can tell me.
I mean, I see a good amount of Canadians, jerseys, and paraphernalia.
Could just be my bubble. Yeah.
I noticed I have no idea where movie theaters.
They're all in like the malls,
Right.
Because the city itself is laid out pretty grid-like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like all of the interconnected tunnel malls are just uncharted territory.
Right.
It's Indiana Jones. What do you miss the most about the U.S.?
The Taco Bell.
They do have them in Canada.
Somewhere.
They even have them in Montreal.
I don't. They have an IKEA here too. I don't know where that is. I saw a Walmart once. I don't care that much.
So what do I miss most about the United States? Well, there's a certain comfort, I think, no matter what country you're from, in all of the freedom that brings. It's not because America is more free. In fact, I think the United States is more restrictive in some ways than Canada. The freedom of being a citizen, so not having to apply for work permits or constantly renew your social insurance number, or all of these hoops that you continuously have to jump through if you're in another country for a certain amount of time. So I do miss that about the States just because I was born there. I did miss all of the crazy flavors of Oreos, which is a very specific miss, but your parents went way too far. They just bought us like a bajillion different flavors of Oreos, so that's good.
Great.
We need them out of the house.
We need
Because,
them.
yeah, as we get by all these Canadian snacks for the video, my ideal is like to never have snacks in the house, because if there are snacks in the house, I will eat them, and I don't need to eat more snacks. I need to eat
He bought this.
healthy things. Well, it was for the video. Plausible deniability. I would say I definitely miss the South. I miss Savannah, Georgia quite a lot.
Yeah.
I will always miss it.
It's definitely the biggest difficulty has been just the distance from people. Video calls are wonderful. I'm trying to think of something else I missed.
Not too much, to be honest. I don't really miss too much. Sorry, States. Maybe it's this election cycle. There's not much to miss. It's hard not to be in a different country and watch all of the horrific news just on a weekly basis come out of the United States and feel that sense of relief. Like, I'm not there. So it's like, yes, I'll miss things about the States, and I definitely plan to return, but we needed a break, and it's been good.
It's a good timing on our part.
Canada!
Canada.
I think like that's about it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ooh, the maple, the sugar,